Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by Alan Morrison. Welcome to the show, Alan. How are you doing?
Yeah, hi Paul. Great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. The reason we're a couple of minutes late today is we were trying to set it up, obviously, remotely, Alan, because you're elsewhere. If everybody could let us know that both voices are coming across loud and clear, that would be great. Now, Alan Morrison may be known to many who tune in as Celtic By Numbers. Alan, you're one of these guys that there's certain people in the game loathe. You're the guy that looks at the stats. Yeah, you look at the stats, you look at the performance data. Data's a massive part, obviously, Alan, of modern football. Before we get into this, because there's a really good reason to have a look at this season so far. So, Alan, when we're looking at these stats, talk us through the report you've done. It's on your Celtic By News blog. Talk us about each of your criteria and what your findings have been.
Sure. So I started off by really expecting to write an article that showed that over the piece of Neil Lennon's tenure, that perhaps performances, were perhaps even stagnant, if not regressing. And the way I wanted to approach that problem, as I say, I'm being very honest about what my perception bias was in starting this piece of work, was I was expecting it to be quite a negative outcome from Neil Lennon's perspective. And the way that I would do this, think of it as like, when you go to the doctors and you get your heart rate and your blood pressure, and there's all these various factors that give you an overall view on your health. It doesn't tell you how fast you can run a 5K, but it gives you an indicator as to, how well you would likely run one when you did. And it's really think of this data in that sense. They're all kind of health indicators of the team. And I really broke them down into three broad categories. So attacking data, which is looking at things like expected goals, because expected goals is more predictive than actual goals in a low-scoring game, because it really is looking at the quality of the chances being created. And if you're creating good quality chances, a lot of them might not be going in. That may be a reversible trend. If you're not creating the chances, then you're not going to score the goals. So it's a good indicator of your sort of chance creation health, and therefore what you're likely to do. Also things like, are you getting into the box? Are you getting possession in the box? How many shots are you getting on target? So from an attacking perspective, these are all good overall health checks, like a bit like your blood pressure and your heart rate and so forth. Similarly, for creativity, we're looking at things like, are we breaking through opposition lines? How many players are we taking out with passes forward? Are we actually breaking the defence, the midfield lines, and actually getting beyond those players? Because obviously if you can get the ball forward and take players out of the game, there's less defenders between you and the ball. It's just kind of common sense. And then how many actual chances are we creating? How many passes are leading to shots? That's clearly another important one. And then finally, defensive metrics. How effectively are we pressing in terms of there's a rather mouthful, but passes per defensive action, horrible name, but essentially it's saying, how many passes are we creating before the opposition get a challenge in, and vice versa, how many passes are the opposition getting before Celtic can get a defensive action in. And obviously I looked at the opposition expected goals as well, and their shots on target and so forth, and touches in the box. So a whole range of measures, fairly high level, but really indicative of the health of the team. And I looked at this really from the last full season of Rodgers to try and give a trend all the way through to the current games.
Well, the stats that you provide, Alan, we have spoken about them regularly on a Celtic State of Mind. And in actual fact, it would be great to eventually get to a stage where you're coming on a weekly basis to give us that, because what I'm hoping to do is to embrace them, embrace the numbers, as it were, Alan, because a lot of the time we come to our own kind of conclusions as football fans, and I'm as guilty as the next. And it's basically observational, isn't it? I mean, there's some basic stats that everybody is aware of, but the observations that you see, and I use the word dysfunctional because I feel that the Celtic team has been playing in that kind of manner this season. We can often give a view, and often, the example used yesterday, Colin Watt was talking last season about how you gave the stats on Maurice Boyer's defensive qualities, and it actually showed that he was performing pretty well as a defender. And a lot of Celtic fans, at the game, and Colin himself didn't rate him as a fullback. So that I found very interesting. Now, when we came on today, as I say, there was some echo, and the people listening gave us that information pretty quickly, as you always do, ladies and gents, and that's really, really much appreciated. What's now happening is there's a slight delay in me hearing Alan, so there might be a wee delay in between questions, so apologies for that. But I think it is important, because the criticism of Neil Lennon's team this season, Alan, obviously we talk about it in our WhatsApp group for AXOM, and I think you and I were on the same view in terms of the performance getting worse. Obviously, I made my feelings known on Sunday, and the criticism and support has come in since then. Let's have a look at your report. Take us through it, break it down, and explain what your findings are now. The next part of this podcast will be very much over to you, Alan. Tell us what your findings are throughout that report.
Yeah, of course. So what I tried to do, as I say, is look at a long period of time. So it's about 190 matches going back to the beginning of the 17-18 season. And the reason that I was doing that is I wanted to see the trends, these health measures that I mentioned. What are the trends of them across the latter part of Roger's reign and then Lennon's reign? And then the other part of it was I looked at specifically this season. So let's just isolate this season and see what's happening to the same metrics for the games that we've seen this year. And in general, there was a very consistent pattern, actually, and I can simplify it quite succinctly without boring people with the individual metrics and what they mean. Essentially, what we've seen over Lennon's tenure is a gradual improvement in a lot of these health indicators, a gradual improvement, I would say, in underlying team performance. Now, there are quite distinct peaks and troughs. What I did was I took a 6-match average of each of the stats. It wasn't a stat for an individual game, because things like unexpected goals for an individual game can go up and down and doesn't tell you all. You need to look at it over a period to really get any trends. So the trends were over 190 games. There was a 6-match average across that period. Even then, there's peaks and troughs, and that's because a lot of these stats actually, the biggest factor is the quality of the opposition. And as we know, Celtic play teams like AC Milan one week, and then, with respect, Hamilton or a lower league team in the cup the next, and so forth. And there's a massive disparity, clearly, in performance from those opposition teams, and therefore that obviously impacts on Celtic's performance. So all that is to be fair, factored in for both managers. Rogers had a European Champions League group. Celtic have had some very tough Europa League groups. So, yes, there's going to be a little bit of variance to play with. But as I say, the very simplistic conclusion is that across Lennon's tenure, performance levels in terms of the underlying performance data has been gradually trending upwards in broadly the right direction. What that says to me is this is somebody who in this first half season or third of a season, when he took the team over the line with Rogers' team playing much in the same way as Rogers' team did, and we have to give him credit for that, because that can't have been easy in some respects, through to last season, which was by any reckoning was an incredibly successful season for Celtic with some great performances, and the data reflects that. And now we've hit, undoubtedly, you cannot deny it, some quite severe bumps in the road. But I suppose if I was putting myself in the position of Neil's manager, and he's in a strategic role. So I'm expecting him to be looking, as well as the tactical win games on every week, but also what are the overall trends. I'm thinking this guy at the end of last year, he's doing more than a good job. In fact, he's doing a great job. And therefore, there's some credit in the bank there in terms of the underlying performances he's getting out of this team. If we go to this season, there's no, escaping the fact that some of these key health indicators are going in the wrong direction. Expected goals, in terms of the goals we can expect Celtic to score, is going down. The number of shots on target is going down. The touches in the opposition box is going down. These are not good. These are not good trends. It's not the case across the board. So we're still breaking through teams reasonably well. Believe it or not, and this surprised me in all honesty, we're still creating increasing numbers of chances. It's a small increase, but we are actually creating chances. And we are actually, and this astonished me, we are actually this season, our pressing effectiveness is actually improved a bit, which I was surprised about, because that's the one metric over Neil's tenure, I would say, that has decreased, is our pressing effectiveness has actually gone down. And that might be, I'm not saying actually that is good or bad. It's a stylistic choice, right? It's a style of play. It doesn't have to be that way. High doesn't necessarily mean good, and low doesn't necessarily mean bad. It's all within the context of, if you're not pressing as effectively, but you're actually conceding less chances, then to me, I'm happy with that, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to stop the opposition from scoring. So, again, surprisingly, the opposition are not actually expecting to score that many goals. And even if we think back to the Milan and defeat in the derby, actually, both those teams pretty much scored from every shot they had on target. So what I'm taking from that is, although there's an absolute regression, and absolutely performance is going south in many key aspects, there's enough areas there that I'm thinking you could make a case for saying, if some of those chances go in, the opposition don't seem to be getting more chances. Are we having one of these runs where literally everything's going in against us? And that does happen over a short period, and actually can happen over quite a long period, as relegated teams find out. But most importantly, is Neil Lennon got enough credit in the bank, and are there enough mitigating factors around Celtic's performance to say, actually, this is a warning, because frankly, things have to improve, and they do. But carry on, because ultimately, if I'm sitting there as Neil's manager, I'm thinking, and to coin Charlie Nicholas, I've backed you 100%, right? And I was astonished. I was astonished we didn't sell anybody in the past window, given the COVID headwinds that we know about, and the performance on the balance sheet is going to be severe. I was astonished we didn't, and the failure to qualify for the Champions League. Absolutely astonished we didn't sell somebody. And so, and we've got in. I think everybody was uniformly happy with the business done in the window. Lennon seemed to be happy as well. So he's been supported. He's deserved that support, because he's done it on the back of improving performance for the team. And now we can see that things aren't going well. But what are the mitigating factors that you can point to? I mean, Celtic have been sort of COVID impacted more than most teams, I would suggest. The continual injuries in the centre half and centre forward department that blight us every year around Champions League qualification have once again hit us. So I just feel that he deserves the chance to put this right. He's earned the right to do that, and also I suspect the board would feel a bit stupid having backed him so adequately, to then sort of almost weeks later turn around and say, "Oh, actually, that wasn't the right decision. We're going to sack you." That probably isn't a strategic long-term view that one might take.
So Alan Morrison has had a look at the numbers. This is on the back of a Celtic State of Mind offering as balanced a view as possible. These are not just my views on the podcast. We have a different guest every single day of the week during the week, and then we mix it up again when we are doing the match day. So today we'll be looking at the game half an hour before kick-off tonight, half-time and at full-time as well. Alan. And what I want, just before you go, Alan, what I'm going to do after you leave us, so that obviously I don't have the situation where I'm listening to you via YouTube and there's a slight delay, give us a prediction for tonight. I don't know how positive you're going to be. It's a strong challenge this evening. Before you go, give us a wee prediction for tonight.
I don't normally do this, to be fair, but hey, it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? In all honesty, I would be astonished if we get a result tonight. This is a very strong team that we're playing. I expect a defeat. And I know this may sound trite, but it's honestly how I feel. I just want to see performances improve, because if Celtic can put up a good performance, a strong defensive shape, have a plan to threaten Lille on the break, we may not win the game, we may lose the game, but if I can see that progression and going back to the strong performances that we had last season, I would take that for now, because I think that would then, perhaps set us up for the domestic challenges to come, which I think are probably what as most supporters feel, and I probably feel it is the most important thing this season on that domestic front, especially with the two Champions League places opening up next season. It's imperative that Celtic get themselves in that pole position. They only have 2 qualifiers to get through. So for me, it's all about performance, and I want to see the performance improving. If that improves, even if we lose, I'll be kind of okay about that.
Well, Alan Morrison, thank you so much for your time today. And once you've left the studio, what I'll do is I'll start having a look through some of the comments that are coming through on Twitter, Facebook, and also on YouTube. But it's been an absolute pleasure to get your perspective on it, to crunch those numbers. And for anybody who's enjoyed that, please visit Alan's blog, Celtic By Numbers. He also posts frequently on Twitter, so start following him on Twitter for the numbers behind the performances. Alan Morrison, thank you again for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind, sir.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, hopefully that the guests who are tuning in can still hear me as normal, because everything should be back to normal just now. And we do have loads of comments coming through. So what I'll try and do for the second part of the show today is we will have a look at some of the comments that are being made from you, ladies and gentlemen. So thankfully, we managed to hear everything loud and clear. And that was great, because obviously we started off with a wee bit of echo. So thanks for telling us. Now, Owen McGrandles, you're making a point there in relation to blocking people, and we are doing that on a live basis. And we're hopefully, getting rid of any offensive comments on a day-by-day basis. They are coming in, gradually to try and get involved. But, any kind of offensive comments or language will be blocked. And there goes another one. So there we go. We'll run through some of your comments. Alan is a very interesting chap. He gives you the facts and the stats behind the performances. But he does it with a very balanced kind of view as well. So what we'll need to do, there's a good question straight off the bat. Where is Frimpong's best position? Alan Robertson. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. For anyone who is watching on YouTube, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you do subscribe to us on YouTube. We're building our platform on a daily basis. I certainly don't think, Alan, that Frimpong is a right back. I think from all the games that I've seen, there is no way that he's a right back. For me, I think he's an offensive player. I think he's a player who, on his day, it can be one of the most exciting forward players that we've got. What I seen against Aberdeen on Sunday many times was that he was struggling to get back to position. So Aberdeen would maybe break up the pitch, and it was left to Duffy, Ayer and Luxo, due to the fact that Frimpong was unable to get back to his normal position at right back. So I don't think he's a right back for any number of reasons, that being one of them. And, I do think that there needs to be a way that we are able to try and accommodate him simply due to his ability as a forward player. So Frimpong's best position for me is definitely as an offensive player on the right-hand side, with Laxalt on the left-hand side, and probably Ryan Christie in the middle at this moment in time. But I am going to ask you about tonight's team. I gave a team yesterday, which has already changed because I understand Elhamed is still out this evening, so he won't be playing. I had him playing at right back as part of a back four, with Greg Taylor playing left back, Ayer and Duffy in the middle, and with Bain in goals. I think Barkas is travelling, but there's not been any confirmation as to whether or not he's fit to play. So I reckon that Barkas would be on the bench. So that back four would have been completed with Elhamed at right back, and that gives us a bit of an issue because obviously what we do have then is a lack of right backs. Frimpong I don't think is effective in that position, so it would be a situation where you're going to have to reshuffle the back four if you're going to be playing that. A lot of people have suggested that Chris Ayer can play at right back, and Eugene Ritchie's actually just making that suggestion. So that shows you how difficult it's going to be tonight. And we're talking about mitigating circumstances. The loss of players through injury and illness obviously is a massive mitigating circumstance. I don't think it's the only reason that the performances have been so bad. Now, Nir Beaton may well be able to play this evening. He's certainly travelling with the Celtic squad, and if that is the case, I would be bringing Nir Beaton in at centre half and actually doing as Eugene suggests and playing Ayer at right back. Again, is that unfair on some of the natural right backs that we have at the club? And one of the players who has been mentioned over the last couple of weeks is Anthony Ralston. The boy's not played for so long that I don't think it's a good idea to put him in tonight in a European game. So for me, it would be Beaton at centre half and pushing out Ayer to the right. Can Nir Beaton play right back? Is that a position that he has played for Israel? There's a question. So follower Celtic gives me his 11 as Bain, Beaton, Ayer, Duffy and Taylor. Laxalt, McGregor, Brown, Christie, Turnbull and Griff. And my team's exactly the same as that, but Turnbull is on the bench and Frimpong is playing on the right-hand side. So Beaton, Ayer, Duffy, Taylor's your back four. Laxalt, Christie and Frimpong are your offensive midfield players, with McGregor and Brown behind them and Griffiths in front. Let me know what you think for the lineup tonight. Because Joe Porter reckons that Beaton has to be centre back. Possibly if you're playing three at the back, Joe, I think there's going to be a change tonight. I mean, we're up against a side who, they're a strong team. Many believe that they're actually stronger than AC Milan. If that's the case, I think we really need to approach the game with that in mind. At this moment in time, the last thing we want is any kind of defeat, but certainly a heavy defeat would be difficult to take tonight. Now, as I say, here's another wee point. Interestingly enough, I was thinking about this on the way through. Mattis Faction, who is commenting on YouTube, and for, again, anyone viewing on YouTube, please subscribe. We are creeping up to the 4,000 subscribers mark. We are growing the channel every single day. And you reckon we should have kept Craig Gordon. Now, what I would certainly say is it's always the best case scenario to have three first teamers, first team goalkeepers. So Scott Baines stood in for Barkas last week on Sunday. Probably will do the same tonight. Would it have been worthwhile keeping Gordon? Would Gordon have wanted to be potentially third choice for periods this season? He obviously went back to Hearts. I think part of that is a coaching role that he's got there at Tynecastle. So, interesting point. And again, at that point, I think we still had one eye on Foster when we let Gordon go, and then obviously we've gone out and we've brought Barkas in. So we do have, for me, we still do have two first-team goalkeepers with a backup as well. Now, Jaffa Cakes 2019 Forrest is a finisher unlike Frimpong. Final ball is a shocker as bad as Christie. Now, the thing with Forrest is, James A. Forrest was getting a fair bit of stick, wasn't he, before his injury. But we do look at some of the games over the last few weeks and we think to ourselves, Jamesy Forrest would have made a difference there. Absolutely. He's an important part of the team and has been for many, many years now. We do miss him when he's not in the team, but with him being injured, it gives us a bit of a headache as to who to play out wide right. Now, yesterday, Colin Watt suggested that Ryan Christie should play there, and I know that he's an adaptable type, but I don't think that's his most effective position. I take on board what you're saying in relation to the final ball of Christie. What I would certainly do is, and particularly now that Griffiths is back, I would take Christie off the set pieces, off the corners, off the free kicks, and let Griffiths take them. I don't think his final ball is always as bad as that. I think a lot of the time we remember the bad ones going astray and going out the park, but he is at the heart, I feel, of many of our creative interludes in games over the piece this season. So he's a definite starter for me, but I would take him off the corners and I would take him off the free kicks as well. Now, Mark Dyer via YouTube reckons that Frimpong's best position is wide right attacking. I agree with you, Mark. His final ball decision making needs to improve, and I think it can. He does have time on his side in that respect. He does have a good recovery pace if used at fullback. That's the one point I actually picked up on Sunday, that I felt that he was slow to get back, and we're talking about playing four at the back. On Sunday, I think Duffy and I were exposed at times due to the nature of Luxo and Frimpong up and down the left and right hand side. So there's loads of great points coming through. We try and work through as many as we can. The first half hour of this show was dedicated to Alan Morrison of Celtic By Numbers, and the reason that was it's all about balance, isn't it? I made a comment in relation to the future of Neil Lennon at Celtic. The comment went down in some areas of the Celtic support pretty badly, saying, back the manager. Well, I've backed him since the day he was appointed. I think it's healthy to have differing views. I don't think that it's hysterical to have a view that's been built up over the piece this season. I don't think that's a view to look forward to say, well, when is it going to improve? Because I think we all agree that it should improve. Is it going to improve tonight? Do you think we can get a result this evening against Lille? Do you think we're going to progress into a Scottish Cup final this Sunday as well? We'll be here every step of the way following that. But obviously, I don't mind criticism. I don't mind people disagreeing with us. But as soon as people become abusive or start making up unsubstantiated rumours and lies online, etc., then unfortunately for them, they're going to be blocked, because we can't allow that to happen. Now, Facebook, unfortunately, the person making this comment, I can't see who it is, because there's a short registration process with StreamYard. But you are saying that the stats say that Christie is one of our most effective players. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I tend to do when I'm watching the game, because we'll be talking about the game as soon as it's finished and at half time, as well as before the game tonight, is I do take notes of passages of play where someone has created a chance, taken a shot, created a goal. And, Christie's name pops up 7-8 times in a half. And that's positive creative play by Christie. So it's not statistics as such, but my observation is, yeah, Christie is one of our most effective players. Now we're talking also about creative players, and many of you were singing the praises of Tommy Rogic at the weekend. He was there for 2 assists. And he is also one of our most creative players, Tommy Rogic. Will he be playing tonight? That's an interesting question. I think he's certainly going to travel. I don't know if he'll start. He wouldn't start in my predicted 11. Tell me what your predicted 11 is. It's all about opinions. Let's keep them nice and balanced. And Tosh Bear Grills Junior Malone, great name. You're viewing us on YouTube as well. Should we make a move for Foster in January? Listen, I've seen that a couple of times being suggested today. I think... who did Neil Lennon actually try and bring in and fail to bring in the transfer window? Fraser Foster. That's the obvious one. I'm sure he was interested in many other players. You're looking at Ivan Toney and the impact he's had at Brentford. What is it, 11 goals, or is it 9 goals in 11 games? He certainly started off very, very well this season. We went for a Yeti. If it wasn't for injuries, I think, we were very, very happy with the signing of Ajeti. We have yet to see a partnership developing with Edouard or Griffiths, and that's down to illness and injury. But should we go for him in January? It's a good question. People might scoff at that because we've spent a lot of money on Barkas, but is the goalkeeper situation that, when you look at the impact that Forster had last year, in particular in the League Cup final, he makes such a difference to the defence. He makes such a difference to the Celtic side under Neil Lennon. It's something that between now and then, let's just see how Barkas performs, how he can come back from the criticism that he's been facing over the last couple of weeks or even months. Now, Terry Tibbs. Griffiths showed he is sharp at Aberdeen. His first touch took the defender completely out of the game. He is sharp, isn't he? I mean, we were all on this podcast, we were calling for Griffiths to get back into the first team squad, weeks before it happened, but he obviously wasn't fit enough, and that's why he was out of the team. We were also calling for Tommy Rogic to come back in. And the reason for that, it's loss of form, it's injuries, it's the illness as well that we've seen hampering our squad. We needed to get as many creative and influential players back into the mix as possible. Rogic and Griffiths have come in and they really are contributing. And I think that's so important that Griffiths plays tonight as well, because Ajeti isn't going to be 100% fit, I don't think. And if you're playing with one striker away against a very strong side in Europe, I think that one striker is Griffiths. It would also be brilliant to see Edouard on the bench again. Tony Hutton, welcome back. Tony, great. Thanks for your support this week as well on Facebook. You're commenting on Twitter, rather. Barkas, the jury is still out on him. I haven't been impressed so far. I think there's been aspects he's given. He's certainly a different goalie, isn't he, from Fraser Forster. Big Fraser Forster was a short stopper, first and foremost, and people were critical of his distribution. People were critical of him at crosses and corners. But when it came down to it, you look at his performances last season against Lazio, his performances against Rangers in the League Cup final. I remember him getting a lot of flack when we got beat 2-0 at Livingston as well, Tony. Nobody's perfect, that's what happens, but I think we'll be viewing Barkas' performances from now to the end of the year, and then we'll be looking in January as to where we can strengthen. Where else do we need to strengthen? We seem to be a bit light on the right-hand side, right down the pitch, actually. I mean, tonight you'd be struggling to pick a right back without playing someone out of position. And, will that force Neil Lennon's hand in the formation and how we shape up? Will we go back? Will he revert back to the three at the back? Bringing in Beaton, Duffy and Ayer, and rely on Luxo and Frimpong to be playing almost as overlapping fullbacks. Is it now a wing back it's called? Up and down, big shifts for those two. It's not beyond them. It really isn't beyond them, and if that's the change that from my team that needs to be made and you play with three at the back, then obviously one of the more offensive players is going to have to be added as well, because we're going to have an extra player. We drop in one of the defenders, that player would need to be Taylor for me, and then you're maybe looking at a situation where you could bring in either in Cham or Turnbull, to shore up. I certainly wouldn't play two up front. Maybe Christie would play off Griffiths' shoulder and you'd bring in Cham or Turnbull. It would be good to see Turnbull getting some minutes as well. I think when we signed him, he was one of the finest players in the Scottish game. Looking at Lewis Ferguson at the weekend, I still think he's somebody we should look at in January as well, particularly if any of the midfield players move on, and there may be moves in and out in January. It might be forced on us. You just don't know what the situation's going to be with injury and illness at that point as well. For me, Turnbull says followers Celtic via Twitter. Turnbull will tighten up defensively, but later Frimpong coming on with his pace. Because El Hamid's out and we might not be able to play with a right back, if we revert to a three at the back, I reckon, Turnbull might well come in. And, if he was to play in a more defensive area, and I know that he's very comfortable going forward, it just means that McGregor is freed to push on as well. Sean Kirkoran, Turnbull looks hungry, throw him in. I think he does. I really do. And Aero 250 makes a point with your avatar being that of Jamesy Forrest. Now that Forrest isn't here, people now see his value. He's a terrific player. Brilliant point. That's an excellent point. What do you think of that? Jamesy Forrest was coming in for a lot of stick, a lot of flack. We see it on the podcast because we're going out live And we go out live directly after the games. And we see people's sometimes emotional responses after games as well. And, Jamesy Forrest was getting a lot of stick. So, sometimes once he's out the team, you might appreciate him a wee bit more. I think that Jamesy Forrest is absolutely a terrific player. We've also got a shout for someone else who plays out right. Debele should play tonight. Vincent O'Brien, thanks for your input. He is one of the only players that can play out there. So, he was part of the squad. He was on the bench. And he's kind of disappeared from view. And we've got also Karamoko might not have the right mentality, says Mattisfaction. I suspect he believes he is already a superstar and is above the club. Now, there is a situation there where the guy has been the most lauded Celtic player since Islam Feruz. There's no doubt about that coming through. And it will be interesting to see how we're able to manage that. How does Neil Lennon manage the youth coming through? Jamesy Forrest obviously was one of his introductions to the Celtic team, and he's done well. Mikey Johnston had come in under Brendan Rodgers, but he was utilised quite a bit by Neil Lennon until his unfortunate injury. And of course, Lenny also brought in players such as Liam Henderson and Daniel Fisher first time round, who didn't stay at Celtic, unfortunately. Particularly in the case of Henderson, who was a player I rated really highly. But Welsh has come in this season, and I think it's very unfortunate for young Welsh that he came in when he did, in such big games that we didn't win. And hopefully he will get more games as the season progresses. But it is interesting to see how Karamoko Dembele's Celtic career will progress, because, it's got, it does have, some signs that it isn't going as well as we thought it would. And it would be good to see him getting some game time. I don't know if tonight is the time for him, because what we do have is obviously we've got a player there who's 17 years of age and who has already played in Europe. And, Mattisfaction goes on to say Welsh has performed well. I think if you look at his performances, you're probably right. He has played well. And, it's just so unfortunate that, he's been involved in games where as a team we didn't play well. Who is Lazal? He is the man. Diego, Aero 250, on the left-hand side. Who is he? It's maybe my pronunciation. Salt is, for me, been a very astute signing by Celtic. I think he's shown enough signs in the 3 games that he's played that he can be a big player for us. If and when, and hopefully it is when, everything clicks for Celtic. So what we've got here as well is a point from Kenneth Elliott. Ferguson will not come you. Well, we'll see about that, because, I don't think it comes down to his upbringing and the football team he supports. I think it goes beyond that. And when you're looking at Ferguson, it's not a player at the moment that Celtic require in that position, certainly. But moves out of Celtic Park may result in us looking at someone like that. Now, Gary Doon and Stephen Kennedy doing the same with midfielders and attackers as well. You're looking at points from Gary Doonan coming in on most of these broadcasts, and it's always great to see you, Gary. And it's brilliant to see you coming in on Facebook and giving us your views on Celtic and the youth aspect of Celtic as well. Sean Kirkcorran, get Didier Agat back. He's only about 50. Sean, I was absolutely privileged to play alongside Didier Agat last year, and unfortunately he's lost his pace. So I don't think he's going to be able to come in and give us anything that, Frimpong can't give us. What's John Kennedy doing with the defenders at training? Asks a Facebook user. And it was due to that that Gary says that Kennedy's doing the same with the midfielders and the attackers, due to the fact that Kennedy is not specifically there as the in the role of a defensive coach. He's there as the first team coach, one of Lenny's coaches, and he is coaching all the players. That was a conversation brought up yesterday by Colin Watt, who was asking about specific coaches for specific areas. And we've obviously got a fantastic goalkeeper coach in Stevie Woods. I mentioned, I think it was at the beginning of this season, about bringing in a striker coach, but that was more about the progression of strikers throughout the club as well. It's something that Kevin Graham pointed out Liverpool have a throwing coach. Can you believe that? They've actually got a throwing coach. It doesn't do them any harm. That's for sure. So, Aero, you were correcting a viewer. Yeah, that's fine. You can correct me as well. I'm not beyond correction, that's for sure. Gary Doonan, Patrick Hutchinson, his goal scoring ratio and assist ratio is better under Lennon than it was under Rodgers. So what we need to look at as well is we've got people coming in and they're making offensive gestures, and they're saying things that unfortunately we won't be listening to. So there's another one. That's very unfortunate that you can't enjoy the award-winning A Celtic State of Mind. Just to remind everybody, it is an award-winning podcast. We were voted as the best podcast in the UK, best football podcast in the UK in 2018. And in 2020, we are a finalist as the best international football podcast. How good is that? So you have an opinion and people disagree with you, and all of a sudden you're the worst podcast on the planet. No, I'm afraid that doesn't change anything. So we're here, we're broadcasting on a daily basis at 12:30. You've already been listening to Alan Morrison giving us the stats behind Lennon's season. Is it as tumultuous as some are suggesting? What did you make of Neil Lennon's press conference yesterday? Let me know as well, because he did come out and he was standing up for his players, as you would expect as well. Now, Adam Harley makes the point that Frimpong is having a tough time at the moment because he's being told to defend and it's not his natural game. Ilhamid would be ahead of him just for now. Well, I think, as a defender, I totally agree with that, Adam. I think Ilhamid is your best option at right back. At this moment in time, looking at the squad. Who are your right backs? Ilhamid. Anthony Ralston, who we saw on the bench at the weekend. Who else can play there? Maybe Ayer, out of position, which I try to avoid as much as possible. And we've seen Beaton playing on the right-hand side of a back three. But right back is a specialist position, and particularly when you look at the way Celtic play. I don't think Frimpong is a natural right back. I think he's a natural attacking player. So yeah, it's not his natural game. But what I was hoping for was some balance, in the offensive areas of midfield, where we had Frimpong on the right hand side, often Christie in the middle. We started off with El Yunusi out left. He's kind of dropped out the team due to his form. Laxalt's now that guy on the left, and I think that gives you a good bank of offensive players in front of the midfield to support Lee Griffiths. I'd love to see that happening this evening as well. Robert Ingram. Celtic should have signed Defoe when he was available. Helps with bringing in the young players. Well, I actually think that it's not a bad shout that Celtic should have someone working with the young players. But we do have some world-class strikers who played with Celtic, who probably still have a good relationship with the club and certainly have a relationship with Neil Lennon. Is the striking situation where we have any concerns? At the moment, it's a defensive situation, isn't it? We've got a new goalkeeper in there. We've got a new pivot in Shane Duffy. Shane Duffy came in for a lot of stick. He responded to some of it on his social media. Is he the type of player with his experience and with his undoubted ability to overcome that once he gets a settled partnership at the back, something he's not had since he came to the club? Martin Murphy Kennedy is not a defensive coach and never has been. Absolutely, yeah. We've been reminded of that a few times. So, there's Gary Doonan picking me up for name dropping again. It does happen from time to time, Gary. Sorry. But it does happen from time to time. Now, Kyle Jolly would go for Bain in goals, Laxalt, Ayer, Beaton, Frimpong, Brown, McGregor, and Cham, Christie, El Yunusi, and Griffiths. And that's a 4-3-2-1. It's a type of formation, Kyle, isn't it, that I think Neil Lennon will go for. I don't think it's going to be a gung-ho approach for obvious reasons. We're away in Europe against a very, very strong Lille side. I think the approach on Sunday, when you look at the team line and the formation, was a bit gung-ho. He played a lot of forward offensive players, creative players. Ultimately, it didn't work. I think before the game, we all said we're certainly going to be we're certainly going to see a lot of goals, and we've seen 6 goals. So he's going to be approaching the game, I think, Kyle, like you say, far more defensively tonight, and packing in the defence with some defensive midfielders as well. Gary Doonan, I was actually name dropping Didier Agat. You look at, sometimes you get these opportunities to play alongside people who have played for Celtic. It's astonishing. But, Gary, he was a great player in his time, wasn't he? And I think he was hindered by a bad injury against Hearts. When a player like that loses that wee bit of pace, you see their whole game suffering, don't you? I think another player that happened to was in a different position, of course, was Mark Burchell, losing a wee bit of pace. And throughout his career, he had a lot of clubs, played a lot of games, scored a lot of goals. But as a young player with that pace, it was just lightning. Very much like Michael Owen down south. And he's spoken about that the minute he lost that yard of pace. He had to completely change his entire game. Now, Gary Doonan, let's keep developing Frimpong. You cannot beat that pace. Just remember, Christie didn't hit it off until he was 23 and 3 years at the club. I think sometimes we forget that, Gary. Players develop at a different pace. I think the performances of Frimpong at this moment in time, when you look at the age of him, they've been, tremendous, really, over the piece. And when he gets a bad game, we do have a lot of criticism coming his way. It does see us looking at people like, Jamesy Forrest, who's out the side, Gary, with an added appreciation. And I know that a lot of Celtic fans appreciate him anyway for his performances and for everything that he's done during the 9 in a row. And let's not get me wrong or get anyone wrong. If you've got an opinion about how things are going this season or with Neil Lennon, it's because you want the best for the club. The hysteria that I've seen has been on the back of a comment that's a viewpoint, a point of view about the manager and how his team is performing this season. The fact that every fan, every single supporter is entitled to these views should be embraced, and that's why when we started the live broadcast, we're able to switch on the comment section, and it allows people to come in. Now, we never have enough time to go through every single comment, but sometimes it's good. If we don't have a guest, or if the guest leaves early after enlightening us with some brilliant stats, as Alan has today, then it gives me an opportunity to go through some more of your points. Now, on Facebook, again, apologies, I don't know who has made the comment, but thank you for making it on Facebook. Salt is going to finish in our top 3 performers at the end of the season. Hope it doesn't end with nothing to show for it. You know what? I don't think he will end up with nothing to show for it. We have, I still believe, a very, very strong squad. I think we've got a stronger squad this season than we did last season. I think the big gaping issue at the moment is the fact that we lost Forster. Some of the other players that we lost Gordon, a wealth of experience, a backup goalie for Celtic in the end. And I think we can take that loss. I also think we can take the loss of Johnny Hayes, a player who I thought was one of the go-tos for Neil Lennon, very reliable, very adaptable. But I think we can take that loss because what's the alternative? Luxo. Who would you choose between Hayes and Luxo? I would definitely go for the latter. And we lost Simunovic, and Simunovic has struggled to find a new club since he left Celtic Park. He's been linked to various clubs. I seen a report the other week there that he was linked to AC Milan. I even seen some Celtic fans suggesting that we should bring him in on a short-term deal. Maybe not a bad shout if he can remain fit. So these are the things that we consider, but I don't think that we have weakened the squad overall this season, and that's why it's sometimes frustrating to be looking at this season and to be looking at the dysfunctional nature of the performances and the team and the selections and wonder why and when, why it's not going right, when it's going to go right. I would love to see Celtic tonight going out, and I think the best that I would expect this evening is, due to the form leading into this game, is the best we can expect would be for a draw, I think. And I am a very optimistic Celtic supporter. And I just think that, a draw would be important also for Sunday's game. Sunday's game's part of a historic run of domestic dominance. Now, we came up against an Aberdeen side on Sunday, who I think played us well. I really do think they played us well. And they will have learned a lot from that game. I don't think we'll approach this game on Sunday in the same way with the same personnel and the same shape. And I do think that we will be strong enough to get past Aberdeen this Sunday as well. Now, Adam Harley, left back looking a stronger position than right back now. I agree with that also. Who'd have thought it? Taylor's had a lot of stick, but it's definitely a safe pair of hands. If you're playing with an out-and-out left back, Taylor gets my shout time and time again as a defender. And I think that when you're then looking at playing a more kind of traditional wing back, it would be Luxo. Absolutely. I can't see there being many occasions this season where we play with both. But if you do, I think, Taylor and Luxo can marry up down the left-hand side, and Hamid and Frimpong would be down the right-hand side. Now, Paul Cockwell. Paul is a Hibs fan, and we don't mind fans of other clubs come onto the Axom podcast or the Bulletin when they give balanced views, and Paul always does. He reckons that Porteous and Nisbet will end up at Celtic. Well, interestingly enough, I was speaking yesterday to Cammy Gill. Cammy Gill, there's me name dropping again, Gary Doonan. Cammy Gill is the goalkeeper for Dunfermline, and he paid us a wee visit yesterday. And Cammy Gill was speaking about how impressed he was by Afolabi, who was on loan at Dunfermline last season from Celtic. He reckons he's got what it takes to make the step up to Celtic, or indeed the top tier to Scottish football. He thinks he's been a very good signing by Dundee this season. But the other player he mentioned obviously was Nisbet, who he played with last season, and he thinks he is also capable of making a further step up from Hibs. And I think Hibs have been very shrewd in their transfer business over the piece, and they're definitely the third club in Scotland at the moment, and we'll see how the season develops. I think Jack Ross and John Potter are an excellent management team, and I also think that they will move on again. They've already had the big move down to Sunderland. I think they will perform well enough at Hibs to get another big move as well. So Sean, thank you for commenting, and thank you for being a fan of a former club who can come on with a balanced view as well. Now, on Facebook, you suggesting that we go for Bain, Elhamed, Duffy, Ayer and Taylor, Brown, Beaton, Frimpong, McGregor, Luxalt and Griffiths. That's the team I actually went for yesterday, but then I was watching Neil Lennon's press conference where he suggested that Elhamed is out and he's not travelled. He's been left in Glasgow, obviously coming back from his illness that he unfortunately picked up on international duty. So yeah, that's the team I picked yesterday. How do you change it? How do you change that? Do you continue with the same shape, or do you move to three at the back? I think it's easier personnel-wise to go three at the back under the circumstances, but we are short at the right-back position. Stephen, brilliant to see you back, sir. Thank you very much for getting involved, and it's always a pleasure to see you getting involved with the show. You're commenting via Twitter. When you're 3-2 up, all you do is put 10 men behind the ball and you win that game against Aberdeen. That was one of my biggest criticisms after the game, was the inability to manage that game out when you were 3-2 up. That was my biggest criticism. You can make a change to affect the game if you're chasing the game, but yeah, you also need to be able to make the changes to see a game out. And, it's brilliant to play fast, flowing, attractive to attacking football, as we did this time last year at Pittodrie when we were 4-0 up after about 40 minutes. That's brilliant. But if you're just going to, grind out a result, as we should have done at Pittodrie, then you've got to be able to manage that game out. We did have some defensive players on the bench. We didn't bring them on, and we didn't tighten it up, unfortunately. So that was a huge disappointment, as well. Now, Kevin Graham, watch Kevin O'Hara at Dunfermline, could follow Nisbet. Oh, well, there are some talented players across the board at Scotland, in Scottish football. And I think what happens a lot of the time is we come to the party too late now, don't we? We've seen what happened with John McGinn. I remember watching John McGinn, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that I said we should have signed him when he was at St Mirren, but I do remember watching him. It was 1-0, I think. Tommy Craig was in charge of St Mirren that day, and McGinn ran the show. He absolutely ran the show. He was part of Danny Lennon's cup final team wasn't he, when they won the League Cup? He was part of that squad, 17 years of age. I think he was on the bench in the final, came on. And the signs were there that you had a special talent. Hibs took the initiative and signed him at a stage of his career that you were able to then develop him, and then obviously got the big move down south. And I think there's some talents like that in Scottish football. I think Turnbull's a talented player, Lewis Ferguson. I think Nesbitt is also at Dunfermline, but he's been kicking about for a few years. The question would be, can he make that step up? I guess, Kevin, I think the step up is massive. And I was speaking to, someone else has made an interesting point, Tam Mannion. O'Hara did great at Alloa. He'll definitely go further. I was astonished to see that Stefan Skugel was at Alloa. It just shows you how players' careers go. A young kid who had been at Celtic at some point in his youth ended up at Livingston making a name for himself and then going to Sheffield United. And then St Johnstone, he's now at Alloa. So it can go either way, can't it? And it's sometimes all about the timing and the coach that you end up playing under. And I think that, when you look at some of the players under Jack Ross, they'll do well. Now, today's show, half of the show was all about Celtic by numbers. They give you the numbers, and Alan Morrison came to the conclusion that Neil Lennon is not doing as badly as I and others have suggested. So, it's all about balance on this show, and we'll take everybody's opinion on board. And it's always a pleasure, even when I'm on my own, to do the Axon Bulletin. And thank you all for making comments and raising questions and queries on the comments section via Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, because we are trying to build that channel up to the 5,000, which is the next target that we have. Now, tonight I'll be joined for the game by Stevie Mullen. Before the game, half an hour before the game, 15 minutes at half time, and half an hour after the game. All that's left for me to say is thank you all for joining me today on A Celtic State of Mind, and I will see you again this evening.